Right, a little bit of history on me, I suppose. I started farming basically when I was 12, really. My father actually died when I was very young. Started growing sunflowers 33 years ago or something like that. You might remember Hyson 21s. Nice, you can't remember that far back, yep. They're a short variety, very quick variety. I had a situation where I thought I could make a few dollars quickly. I planted them at about Christmas time, I think, and that was my first introduction. Grown sunflowers basically every year since. Got into grey stripes about 17 years ago, and that's my specialty. I feed the birdseed market in Australia. Lucky in Toowoomba we have about 6 packers, people that make the birdseed, so I've got quite a few markets there for myself. Because I've been in it for so long, they ring me, I don't have to ring them, so that's all good. Also grow a bit of canary as well, so I'm actually talking to the packers consistently, so if it's not canary I'm trying to get rid of, it's grey striped sunnies. Oops, wrong one. Hope this works from here. Okay, that's actually a paddock next door to me. People that have been out my way might recognise that as a rife at school. Looks nice and pretty. It's actually, not too many ladies in the room, bloody awful. Okay, it was actually planted with a combine. He had 6 or 8, this sort of area, and he had nothing for ages. 6 or 8 and nothing. Nice big heads that you can see there, you know, they look all right, but underneath there's little heads way down the bottom there that were about that big, had nothing in it at all. Crop next door basically. If you're growing sunnies, that's the sort of thing you should be aiming for. Nice big head, full right to the middle, you'll get good grain size throughout the whole thing, and you'll actually make it very easy for yourself to harvest. Got a couple of slides here because we found out early on that agros are very smart people, but they don't actually know what happens inside a header. So I've got these here just for the benefit of everyone that doesn't understand. You've got the front here, goes up the feeder house. This is a conventional header, right? And then you have a drum there and concave. So when you're travelling along, you've got this thing that's rotating underneath you that is actually thrashing. That's where your seed gets separated from your head. The straw goes out here over the walkers that walk like that, take the trash out the back. They have little slots in them. Some of the grain and trash goes down here onto the sieves. They have a fan in there. There's usually 2 layers of sieves and a fan. The sieves are actually going like that too. Okay? So that whole motion, everything's walking out the back. Once it's gone through the sieves here, it goes up into the grain box. Pretty simple. Haven't been changed for years. Until about 25 years ago, rotary headers were invented. In this case, still the same sort of front, feeder house, straw goes up there, but in this case, the rotor is actually a drum that goes the length of the header. So the straw comes in the front here, goes up the rotor, spits out the rotor, and drops onto the ground. The seed and small trash goes through slots in that rotor, again, drops down onto your sieves, fan here again, same sort of process as in the conventional. Once the grain's clean, up into the bin up the top. All pretty good. Basically said this there before, you've got the gathering process, that's where it comes into the front. Your separating process, that's where your rotor or your drum is. Then your cleaning process. The things that actually affect what happens to you when you're setting the header, or what makes it easier for you to set the header, okay? Your crop readiness, that's how green your straw are, how green your heads are, etc., etc. Your seed moisture, having fun today. Your seed moisture content, this can actually be ready before that's ready, or vice versa, okay? The evenness of stand, we've all said that in all our presentations. If you get a nice even stand, your crop will grow better, you'll have less weeds, and it'll actually be easier to harvest, okay? Because if you've got to plant whatever your plant population is, but say that far, every head's going to be the same size throughout the whole paddock. So once you set your header, off you go, same speed, same everything, easy to do. So always try to go for evenness of crop. Plant population, obviously if you're going to end up with little shriveled up little heads, you've got a lot of trash there for only half a dozen seeds in each head. Get a nice big head, all happens for you. And guidance systems, I'll talk to that a little bit later when I've got a photo up here. I apologise for these photos. That's actually a roadside that you can see in the back down. It's not in crop, so it's not as bad as it looks. If you look at that there, see the yellowing on the back of those heads? They're all yellow there. They're nearly very close. This one here is dry. That one actually you could harvest. Okay, but from there to over here, see there's still some there with yellow heads, right? That head there is dry there, but it's only dry down here, down the rest of the stalk's green. Okay, from there to there could be 1 day. That's all it is. Okay, so don't look out the back window and go, oh, I think my sonnies will be ready next week, I might get the header ready. Okay, get the bloody header ready well and truly beforehand. You need it ready. Moisture content. Receivable standards 9%. Don't be afraid to start a little bit early, especially if you've got aeration or drying. It's the way to go. Always keep in mind that every percent that you are below that receivable standard costs you money, because it's actually water that you could have sold to Cargill. Okay? Always keep it up there. If you run at a moisture content, seed moisture content down there somewhere, you will find it hard to set your header. All the stalk and everything that you put in your front will actually get broken up and will actually end up on top of those sieves. Makes your life very difficult. Crop conditions, evenness of crop. Okay, you look across that there, they're all the same height, they're all at the same vegetative stage, although they're a bit more than that, aren't they? They're opening up. The plants, you can nearly pull one out over here and go across the other side of the room and pull one out there, put them to side by side, and they look the same. You get that, very easy to harvest. This one here, unfortunately, a bit hard to visualise. That's actually 3 metres tall. Okay, nearly the height of the ceiling. They're actually a grey stripe, Sunbird 7, to be honest. This grower wasn't ready when they were ready. He was about 4 or 5 days late. If you look, there's actually heads down there, right, which is down at this height. So he had to harvest, he had to make the decision actually, to either pick up those heads down the bottom or just cut it off up here as high as his comb would go and forget about those ones down there. Okay? If he'd been there 3 or 4 days earlier, wouldn't have had that problem. I'll put this one here. I don't know how many people here are with auto steer, etc., etc. Obviously, if you have auto steer, your comb width's the same size as your machinery, your streamlining, etc., etc. Your guess row's not a problem. But I also put it here because sunflowers do not like compaction at all. So please do not go ploughing, spraying across the paddock this way and then planting across that way. You'll end up with hips and hollers across your paddock. Again, what I'm talking about, unevenness. Gathering process, pretty straightforward. This is where we need Liz soon. That's all right. Harvesting sunflowers, you do need sunflower trays. They're about that long. Do not go out and buy a second-hand set that's an old set that has a bar along the front, that you have a pipe goes up to the sunflower tray and all that sort of stuff. They're a pain in the proverbial. These bolt straight onto your knife guard underneath. I can actually put all that whole assembly on my header in about 2 hours by myself. The two, what's the names on each end there? They take me the most amount of time. A, because they're heavy, and B, because there's about 3 or 4 sheets for it. Okay? There are what people call Sullivan reels. Okay, it's a little drum about that big, has little spines, 3 little spines on it, rotates just above your knife. Your sunflowers there, The idea with that is that it pushes the sunflower down. There's a bar underneath here, just a little bit of water pipe, okay? So that stops the stalk getting cut off, and it's all set up so that as that goes down, when it gets to a point there, the Sullivan reel will pull that head through, the knife cuts him off, and you just take the head and a little bit of stalk. All works well in the right conditions. You don't always have the right conditions. That also can reduce your ground speed because you can only get that spinning so fast because it's only a little thing like that. If you're going 11 kilometres an hour, it can reduce your ground speed. You may have noticed this crop divider here, it's only low. I have a very high one because I grow grey stripes, have to do that all the time. I would suggest if you're going to get a divider, make sure you get a high one just in case you do need it later on. Also, this is a case 1010 front. See that shield up the back there? Funny thing about that high, you just have a standard front. When you hit a head, often they'll explode. The seed will go over the back. If you've got really high sunnies, the sunflower stalk can get cut off here. They can just flip over the back there and you lose quite a few of them, okay? Don't do what some people do. Put a thing up there and put a chicken mesh there. It'll save the heads, but it won't save those seeds. You may as well just have a sheet there, be done with it. Do it right in the first place. Liz, does everyone realise that sunflowers, when they dry, they actually point to the east? Okay, if you got them planted... What was that, sorry?
This is how you strip a sunflower. This is how you strip a sunflower.
Over here, so you're not in the thing. Right, we'll pretend that's east. You're a sunflower. We got a tall sunflower today instead of a shorter one. Anyway, now this is actually pertinent when you've got sort of northeast to northwest runs, okay? Your sunflowers are going to be standing there like this, right? If I'm harvesting, my crop divider comes through here, right? It'll bounce off him and go off the next head, bounce off, bounce off, bounce off, okay? Now when that actually hits that head shakes, or the divider actually hits that head, and you'll lose 4 or 5 seeds. Who cares? But if you add up the next head that you've hit had 4 or 5, the next one 4 or 5, etc., etc., I worked out the other day that you lose between 3 and 5 kgs, right? You've got 100 hectares, do your sums, you've lost, you can actually go and sit down. No, you can't. You've got to come back here. You can actually pick up, it's only a few dollars a hectare, but you pick up a few dollars. And those dollars are actually in your pocket, okay? If you're actually harvested, and she's there, and my crop divider comes through here, it actually doesn't touch because you've got your guest row there, okay? Whereas she's hanging into your guest row. So if you go through here, harvest, come back and come through the other way, you pick up a couple of kgs. Thank you very much. Just simple things like that. Try not to. Desperately try not to. I'll talk later on about protection under your header, very briefly. Yet try not to reverse. Stalks, sunflower stalks are like travelling through little saplings. Really they are. Okay, this is again me being too late. See all the grain lying around here? This is actually travelling along in a not a very good crop, grain going everywhere. That's what I mean. Get there when it's ripe or the day before. Go for it. Also keep in mind when you plant, keep in mind your harvest capacity. Don't go out there and plant 500 hectares in one day when it's going to take you 3 days to harvest those sunnies. Okay? You should actually do that with all your crops, if you can. Separating process. You've got 4 adjustments there. Your rotor speed, rotor or drum speed, your clearance, and your wire. You always use large wires in your concaves for a... Pete doesn't, obviously. Don't get good enough at USB. Some people actually end up using blanking sheets. Okay? And I'll show you what they are. That's just large wire. With rotor speed, I always run it down to the minimum and just back it up a little bit. Running very, very low speeds all the time. clearance always is max. Never had a situation where I've had to go under. Blanking sheets, only use them if you're running dry. You know, your grain's too dry, you're getting too much trash that's actually coming through onto your sieves. You can put blanking sheets in there. Never done it myself. Cleaning process, you've got the chaffer, which is the top sieve, shoe sieve, and then your fan speeds. They're the different changes you can make. Open and close the top one, open and close the bottom, and change your fan speed. If you're having trouble with your top sieve, set it to about 12 mil. Most headers have on the back of them a little sheet you can adjust on the back, another separate sieve. Open it up to about 15 mil. If you're having trouble with grain being carried over the back, okay, you've either got your chaffer closed too much, top sieve closed too much, your fan speed could be too high, but it's very, very unlikely. It's more likely that you've actually got your fan speed too low. Okay? Or it is possible that you've actually closed the bottom one way too much and you're just stifling the air that's coming through to the top one, or you're actually creating too much repeats. Okay? The repeats is the grain that's coming off your bottom sieve. If it goes back into a thing and goes back into your rotor and back around. So you can actually get this build-up of stuff. Okay, best way to set a header. Dive into your crop. Something I always do whenever I'm starting a new season crop, I actually leave all the doors open everywhere. I go down about 50 metres or so, then I start shutting my doors. We're talking about insects there before. That's just a way of getting rid of the shit that's in the header that you haven't been able to clean out, because there is always stuff there. Gets rid of that, close a couple of doors, get a bit of grain into the bin, then I dump that all on the ground in the next 50 metres or so. People look at it and go, shit, you're wasting the stuff, but you're actually saving your time and energy when it comes later on. You haven't got the insects in your silo before you start. Okay, to set your header properly, go in, travel a little bit, set it to where you think it should be. Then you need to do what's called a stall stop. Basically, some of the newer headers are a bit harder to do. If you've got an older model that has all mechanical drives, basically all you do, drive along, leave everything in gear, turn the key off, hit the brakes. And from meter peak or a little bit further, you go from 10 kilometres out to zilch. And you get out, have a look around, and have a look in the back of your header. That's the back of my 23 inside when I do a stall stop. Looks as though it's chockers. It's not. Don't worry about this stuff here. That's come off the beater out of the rotor. That's just a heavy straw that's fallen down as you actually physically stop. But if you look here, gone from a huge amount of stuff there onto the sieves, tapers back to virtually nothing. Okay? So I'm actually getting rid of all that stuff early on. When you do your stall stop, that first bag that went around, you actually go into your top sieve there, have a look at where your seed is in that mat of debris that's there, okay? If you and this is about that far in from the end, not right up the front. Excuse me. If there's no seed in that at all, no seed at all, but you've got grain on the ground, and that's full grain on the ground, you've actually got your fan speed too high. Not very common. Okay? You actually, as soon as that grain is falling down onto your top sieve, you picked it up and just chucked it straight out the back. Okay? Not very common. If the seed's at the bottom of your trash, you've probably got not enough fan speed. With the whole operation, you need that trash to be coming off your rotor, down onto your sieves, and it actually floats. Right? Everything floats. It's not, if you look in the back of a header and you can see it like a mat going like this, it's not operating correctly. It's got to go down there and just float. Nice smooth operation. This is the main thing that I have found with all the people that have given me a call and said, Kevin, can you come and have a look at my header? I can't get it going. They've actually got their fan speed too low. Okay? Most headers, you're running around about 800 RPM, maybe a bit higher. People think that sunflowers are light, so I need a light fan speed. Not true. This is your shoe sieve, bottom sieve, about 6 to 8 mil. There are still some headers running around that have a perforated sheet down there. It'll have to be about 10 to 12 mil to get a good sample. Everyone knows what the repeats is. That's the grain that's coming off that bottom sieve, goes back through the machine. When you do your stall stop, make sure you open that door, have a look what's in those repeats. If there's grain in there, there should always be a little bit of grain in there, but you don't want it to be pure grain. That means you've got that bottom sieve too closed. Okay, see the grain? That's repeats. Unfortunately, they're greys again. Just a small amount of grain in there. This is actually a photo of that bag that went around that I said squeeze the grain. That was actually on the ground behind a header. Looks pretty ordinary, doesn't it, when you look at that? This gentleman rang me and said, you know, Kevin, can you have a look? I just can't get my header running right. I went there and I'd said to go for a drive and we'll have a look, and went for a drive, and he was going about half the pace I thought he should be going, and he was getting a reasonable sample, but it just wasn't working. So I said, can I actually change this all for you? So I went in and I just changed it to what I thought it should be. We went for a run. He took off, did about his same speed, and I said, right, can you go twice as fast now? And he looked at me and went, I suppose. Which he did, and that's what ended up on the ground. Looks horrible. That afternoon I was at home and I took this photo. That was on the ground behind my header. And you'd say, well, I know which one's working right. There's a seed there and there's another seed somewhere. I can't remember. There's one there. But when you actually looked at it, they were both exactly the same. All this seed in here had nothing in it. I sat down and squashed and squashed and squashed, and there was not a seed there that was worth having. Okay? And I know the gentleman did, because I was talking to him about 4 or 5 weeks later. He actually sent this off to Cargill, got low oil contents. And he couldn't twig that he'd actually sent off a huge percentage that had nothing in it. Okay? It's no use keeping seed in that bin that is not worth having. If there's no kernel in there, you're not going to get paid for it. All you're doing is paying freight to wherever you've got to pay the freight to. Something I didn't say earlier on about setting the rotor or setting the machine. When you set a machine, I always set it to whatever the rotor will handle. Starts to rumble, back off a little bit. That's your ground speed that you can stick to. You can always set the back to whatever you're running at, okay? You want to get the maximum out of that header that you possibly can. There's no use having a header that's got 5,000 hours on it when it could have 2.5. A, you've sat on there twice as long as you should do, and B, wear and tear on the machine. Okay, that's the losses that were actually behind my header. Right, one there and one there. They were actually not from off the sieves. They were actually gathering losses up the front. Just a couple of other little things here. I always use them on my repeats and on my clean grain elevators down the bottom. Some headers you can actually put a plate in under here. I've never used that. People usually use them for soybeans. My header also, and a lot of headers have this on the outload auger, another perforated sheet there. It is astounding what will come out of there, those fines that are in that sample that are running around. It takes an awful lot of those fines out. Someone said about stalks, always think about your header. Think about what damage could be done to a header by those stalks. This is off of New Holland. He's put a tray under there. That's his fan cowling in there. Some people have a drag chain. I'm not a believer in it, but that's supposed to stop static electricity. One thing that's supposed to happen. With rotary headers, I've always found that if you're having trouble getting a sample, you're probably travelling too slow. Okay? Get that rotor so she's just rumbling, back off a little bit, and you'll probably find the rest of the whole machine is easier to set. Okay, showing this little thing. Unfortunately, it's a little bit shaky. I actually was trying to harvest and holding a camera in one hand while I'm trying to control everything else. Okay. What I did was, you start off in your run. So I used both hands then, got up to about 5 or 6k, then I grabbed the camera and I started to video. So I was doing 5 or 6k when I start off here. And if you look, I'll show you, we'll play it a couple of times. So I'm going about 5 or 6k there and increase my speed up to, that's doing about 10k, okay? If you look, you can see seeds all bouncing around there. If I didn't have that shield there, I was going to be losing all them. Okay, and here, about somewhere here, I actually slowed down. Okay, went back to 5k. Now that's doing 2.6 tonne to the hectare, that crop. Not a bad crop. People say you can't travel at that speed. I had nothing on the ground behind me. Now, to just demonstrate, Liz will play that again. Oh, you can't see it real well. That's my monitor thing there. I'm flat seeing it myself. That needle was actually over in the red when I'm starting off, right? When I was doing about 5 or 6k. When I went up to 10, she went into the low green. And then when I slow down again, it actually goes that way. Most people when they set the header, when they slow down, it actually goes that way. Okay? If you're running at maximum capacity, it'll actually work the other way. Because your sieves, when you're going slow, you haven't got the load on your sieves, the fan, the force of the wind that's coming through there will actually pick the grain up and chuck it over the back. When you set your monitors, do not set them at the big grain size. Sunflowers is a big grain, but it's not a heavy grain. Okay, you'll probably find it's around about 2/3. Okay, if you set it at the big one, I got a winder. If you set it at the big one, you're actually measuring straw that's going over the back. You're not measuring the grain. Okay, just to finish off, I usually do this at first, but I've grown sunflowers for, as I said, for a very, very long time. I actually grew, believe it or not, 10% of this grey stripe 1 year, the whole Australian grey stripe production. That year I sold a small B double of 32 tonne for $49,000. If you're in doing that, you stay there and you do it. Okay? That money's not there at the moment. If you're running with blacks, you are selling to a standard market. Sometimes there are things, the horse market, things like that. There's a lot of blacks that go into the horse market. Don't be afraid to go to those markets and see what they're doing at the moment. Okay? Yeah, anyway. As I said earlier, in summary, stall stop, only way to check what's happening in your header. Don't do that, you're having a guess. When you do your stall stop, don't go, all right, I've worked out what's going on here, I'm going to change this, this, this and this. Think about what you're doing and go, I need to change that one. Okay, don't go out and change 5 things at one time or something like that. Just change 1, maybe 2 if you really know what you're doing. Okay, because if you change 4 and still have a problem, you haven't actually got anywhere. You don't know what's happening inside that machine. This is something that I really, really push. Every grain that you drop on the ground is actually profit in your pocket. If you just do an average job, that's fine. But if you could pick up another 10 kgs to a hectare, that's actually 10 kgs of profit. Think about that all the time. Also, when you're running a machine, run it to maximum capacity. It's there with big capacity, use that capacity. It's no use having a $5,000 fuel bill when it could have been half that. And your machine could have been in the shed in half the time. Okay? Final product. That's actually a photo of the inside the truck of the same sample that I sent around. I don't know whether anyone noticed, but if you actually look in that sample, there's one sorghum seed. I noticed, you see it, Peter, did you? I noticed it the other day. I just rattled it around. Oh, what's that doing in there? But anyway. And that's a black sample out of my truck too. So It's quite possible, quite easy, and that's running at capacity. It's not doing anything where you're trying to make a really clean sample or something. You can actually get a sample that's as good as the seed that you put in the ground. Okay, thank you and happy harvesting.